G'day guys, so today we're going to be looking at Australia's resources. So we're continuing from our unit we've started on economics. Okay, this is our third lesson on it, and today's chapter is mainly focuses on 3.5 Australia's resources. So a little recap of what we've done so far. We've looked at what is economics and established that economics is the study of how goods and services are produced to satisfy the finite needs and infinite wants of the entire population. So a couple of new terms in there that we've learnt. Looked at needs versus wants. So what do you need to survive versus what do you actually want to satisfy your desires. So finite versus infinite. So infinite into infinity, that's unlimited. Finite is obviously limited. Goods and services. So understanding that goods are tangible, services are intangible. Last class we looked at economic flows. So that was the movement of money, labour, other resources and goods and services between sectors. And we got introduced to 3 different types of resources. Now this is going to be important for today's lesson, these 3 we're going to be looking at in depth. So we've got land, or natural resources as it's being called today. They're all natural resources that are extracted from earth or natural processes. So that can include, mining for metal, logging for timber, water. There's a range of different natural and land resources. Labour is the human capital or all human effort in the production of goods and services. So that looks at the work of humans. Okay, so when you hear the term labour force, that's talking about the work of humans. And the last one is capital. So goods, and they're goods used in production of other goods. These include machinery, tools and buildings. They are made by man to help production. A classic example of that is in cars. So machinery is used to make cars in the production line, which is an interesting topic at the moment because in Australia the price of labour is actually quite expensive, and to produce cars we use lots of machinery, and Ford and Holden have recently announced that they're closing down their production factories because they just can't afford it anymore. Okay, how do we allocate our resources so that they don't run out? It's a very big question, and one that people have different opinions about. So to produce goods and services, we must use a combination of resources such as land, labour and capital. We can't just rely on one. Does Australia have the resources to make all the goods and services it needs? Who owns these raw resources? How can they best be used to benefit all Australians? Alright, first resource we're looking at, natural resources. By world standards, Australia has abundant natural resources, including underground minerals such as aluminium, coal and iron ore, lush forests of timber, and a vast amount of land suitable for farming. These resources may be owned publicly by all citizens in Australia. As a nation, we put our trust in the government to ensure that these resources, the natural resources, are used properly. Without selling the land, the government may allow businesses to use national property under terms of a contract or lease. So just like you lease a house, I currently lease a house, so I rent that house out from someone who owns it. Okay, and there's a few pictures of our natural resources. There's a constant struggle between what people think is right for the environment and what businesses want to do to make money. So for instance, in the use of timber, if we're looking at natural resources, timber businesses would like to cut down more trees to make more furniture, to allow to sell the timber for construction and for heating. However, the government and environmentalists want to keep the forests intact to protect the native wildlife and natural beauty. So down the bottom right hand corner I've got there are pros and cons for natural forest areas and for logging. Can you think of some? I'd like you to pause this video now, draw up a little table in your exercise book and think of the pros for logging and the cons for logging. Continuing on natural resources. So we export our raw materials to countries such as Japan, China and the United States for them to make goods and services from our natural resources. So Australia's economy relies heavily on selling its natural resources to such countries. And there's two definitions here I would like you to write down. Export and import. The term export means shipping goods and services out of the port of a country. So it's selling goods and services to countries abroad. Whereas imports brings in goods and services through purchasing from overseas, brings in goods and services into a country from abroad for sale here. So please pause this video and write down those two definitions. Okay, labour resources. We've just looked at land and natural resources. Let's look at labour resources. Builders, plumbers, teachers, singers, accountants and tram drivers are all examples of labour resources that are used to provide goods and services. Compared to countries such as China, India, Indonesia, our Asia Pacific neighbours, we have a relatively small population. We can see that from looking at this table on this slide. China has the top, so there's the world's top 10 countries by population. China's number one. Their 2008 population was 1.3 billion. Expected population in 2050 is nearly 1.5 billion. If you think about Australia at the moment, we're around 23 to 24 million people. So using this graph, I would like you to work out the percentage of Australia's population compared to China, Brazil and Japan for the year 2008. Alright, so we're going to look at our last of, so still on labour resources, so it's an interesting topic here, the price of labour. So the price of skilled labour, so what people get paid, is largely determined by the laws of demand and supply. That's an area we might look at later. So where there is a huge supply of skilled labour in a particular area, the price is low. This is because there is a lot of competition for each job. To secure a job, one person may be prepared to work for less than another. So let's have a think about it. What we mean by a large supply of labour. Look at China's population, 1.3 billion people. So there's a lot of people fighting for the same jobs because there just can't be that many jobs to go around. So if there's so many people prepared, they're prepared to work for less pay. That's why a lot of companies such as Nike, lots of companies, Nike's just one example that was in the media a few years ago, kind of exploiting this cheap labour in Vietnam in particular, and there's a photo taken from their factory. Often conditions aren't fantastic, the pay's not good, and these people work very, very hard for very, very little in return. Okay, capital resources. Our last of our three. Capital resources, such as computerised systems, trucks and machinery, play a big part in the production of all goods and services in Australia. For example, cars are assembled by robots because using expensive technology is cheaper in the long run than employing people to perform the same tasks. So that's what I was talking about earlier with Holden and Ford. Machines taken over, but still the price to pay for the total production of a car was too much, so they've had to close down their factory. Most capital resources that Australian businesses use are bought from countries such as Japan and China because they can make them at a lower cost than we could. And there's a photo there of a car being made in a production line. I don't know about you guys, but I'm not sure what the Terminator would be classified, what kind of resource would be classified as. Natural, labour or capital. He's made up of metal, that might be a natural resource. Is he a person? He might be a labour resource. Or is he also a machine? It could be a capital resource. I'd be keen to hear your thoughts, and that concludes our video for today.